Yes, I wanted to make a video about three-phase power and phase converters that was on a level that I could understand. Because when I first started looking into phase converters and making my own three-phase power, I found a bunch of videos talking about it, but a lot of them were so in-depth that I couldn't even follow it. I know my way around electricity, but not that well. So hopefully this will explain it easy enough that most people can understand it and on a level where I could have understood it whenever I was first researching it. So essentially what you've got single phase power. Power works in a sine wave. So you've got single phase power and then three phase power. You got one single phase versus actually three phases, making the power more even. So essentially what you've got here, this would be power coming in from your panel from your house, from your wall. 210 volt legs, just like the power that would power up your dryer or something like that runs on 220 volts. So you'd have leg 1 and leg 2 coming in to your phase converter here. Now the phase converter has capacitors in it. The purpose of the capacitors is to store up enough electricity to provide a third phase for your motor to initially spin. So for this to work, you need a phase converter and you also need a motor sized appropriately for your phase converter. I ended up with a 10 horse phase converter and a 10 horse motor that ought to run anything that I ever want to run. So what happens, you got leg 1 and 2 into the phase, and this is highly simplified. There's more to it than this, but this is the easy version that I can understand. Leg 1 and 2 comes in. It uses some of that power to charge up these capacitors here. Then when you push the go button, leg 1 and 2 are always going to the motor. Then when you push the go button, it discharges these capacitors out of leg 3 and gives all three phases all the power to the motor to initiate it spinning. And the reason why you need the capacitors is because the motor won't spin on just two legs, or won't start on two legs. There's other ways. You could have a single phase motor to spin up the three phase motor, and once it's spinning, then you could disconnect the single phase motor, but that's just a whole lot more moving pieces. You could also somehow spin it by hand. Potentially, I don't know that you could ever spin it fast enough by hand, and then have leg 1 and 2 spin it from there. So what happens, leg 1, 2, and 3, third leg from the capacitors, hits it, initiates the spin, and once it's spinning, it will run off of two legs, and then it will generate the third leg out of the windings in the motor, kind of sort of like an alternator. It's the closest thing I can compare it to. And then it feeds that voltage back in to the phase converter. It does its magic with it, but essentially you've got three-phase power back to the phase converter then, because the motor's sitting there spinning, running on the two legs from your panel that will keep it spinning once it's spinning. Then it's also generating its own third leg out of the windings in the motor, pushing it back into the phase converter. So then you pull your power out to a separate panel or run it direct to your machine, whatever you want to do. So then your power out comes off of leg 1 and leg 2 that you provided already, and then leg 3 comes off of the third leg that's coming out of the motor now that it's spinning. It sounds really complex, but it's simple once you wrap your head around it. I'll go over here and show you my phase converter and show you what one looks like. So this is my phase converter. It's an American rotary. I think I gave something like $289 for this. You can piece these together out of parts or even buy a kit on the internet and put it together. But for $289 to have a turnkey unit, all you've got to supply is the motor and hook it up, seemed like a bargain to me. So this is my power coming from my panel. It's an old 220 volt breaker that I already had in my panel. It comes in to the phase converter, and then my motor power comes out the bottom and goes outside to the motor. Then my actual power coming out comes out into this separate three-phase panel that I picked up. that's got my breakers for my 3-phase power. And it's just three breakers joined together, just like you would expect. And from those breakers, they run out. One goes to the mill here, and one goes to the lift. So powering it up, turned on. Now you're feeding leg 1 and 2 to your phase converter. I give it a second to charge the capacitors. They're up in here. Capacitors are charged up. Now whenever I push the start button, those capacitors are going to discharge to the third leg of the motor, starting it spinning. Then once it's spinning, it will actually generate the third leg, come back around, and power this up. It's that simple. Now the motor's out there spinning off of our 2 legs that we had coming in, making the third leg that came in from the motor. Now we've got 3-phase to our panel, going through the breakers. Now to our machines. That's simple. I did make another video talking about the American Rotary phase converter, where I pulled the front cover off of it and showed the insides and talked about that a little bit more if you're interested. But that about covers it for a simplified version of phase converters. Hope that helps somebody out there. Thanks.